Welcome, and thank you for being here. We're very grateful to you for joining us tonight and for being part of our community. My name is Elric Walker. I'm a board member of the Jung Association of Western Massachusetts. Before we begin, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the Jung Association of Western Massachusetts. We're a mostly volunteer organization founded in 1996, concerned with promoting and exploring in community with others the ideas of the great depth psychologist Carl Gustav Jung. I'd like to take a quick moment to introduce you to our board members and to the members of our advisory board, and to thank them all for their good work on behalf of the association. Christine Olson is our president. Penelope Tarasuk and Erica Lorenz are current board members and advisors, and two of the longest serving members on the board. Erica served previously as our president. Both are authors and practicing Jungian analysts. Penelope's book, Polishing the Bones, I believe is available. Erica is about to release her book, Body as Shadow, Jung's Method of Embodied Healing. And I believe this should be available in February of 2026. So look for that. Peter O'Brien is our speaker liaison. Janine Cooper is our treasurer and bookkeeper. Daniel Kinsey is our newest board member, and he is assisting with the coordination of local events. I serve as public relations liaison and promotional coordinator for the association. We're also grateful to the members of our advisory board, author, poet, and depth psychotherapist, Dr. Ed Tick, who previously served on our board of directors. Ed Tick's book, Passage to Poros, is available now. He also has other great books to look for. Psychologist and therapist Dr. Carol Beauvais was also previously on the board of directors. Retired family therapist and historian Peter Williams also previously served on our board of directors. Joe Coolin, who was the former publisher of Parabola magazine and who has recently become a children's book author. We thank them all for their many ongoing contributions and for their much sought after sage wisdom. Many kind thanks to Jonathan Capra, who is our webmaster, and to Andrew Grant, who will be providing Zoom and technical assistance tonight. This will be Andrew's last night in the capacity of Zoom master. We want to really thank you, Andrew, for the many years that you have brought and done this for us and the organization. I believe that Andrew really kind of came in around the time that COVID struck, and we began to make a transition to doing our lectures on Zoom. We will miss you, but I hope you will be around, and I expect you will still be a friend. Upcoming, our local film and discussion series continues on Sunday, December 14th. That will be at 4 p.m. at the Smith College Campus Center. So if you're local, please come. We will be in room 204 on the 14th. This is a different room than we've met in before. So I think there will be signs to help you get to the correct room. If you can get to the campus center, we'll get you to the right room. So if you are local and you've not been to one of these events, please come. We will show a short Jung-related film and then open up for a discussion. The discussion part is often the best part, as we get to come together in person to share ideas and information. It's always a soulful and encouraging conversation. So that's December 14th, 4 p.m. to 5:30. Our next lecture, our next online lecture, will be on Saturday, January the 10th at 10 a.m. We will present Sunita Sivamani and she will be speaking about Kali, Dance of Rage and Desire. This presentation will explore the goddess Kali in her unknown avatar, the dancing goddess who holds passion and desire. Along with her fierce, destructive form, we explore how she holds the projection of the human shadow that has the untamed capacity for violence and darkness. Now, please note, this is on Saturday. We usually do our lectures on Friday nights. This will be a Saturday morning. I believe she will be attending the Zoom from India, and so there's a time difference. So this will be Saturday, January 10th at 10 a.m. Please check our website for more information on these or any other of our upcoming events. You will also find in the archive section of the website videos of past lectures and events. The website is westmassjung.org. westmassjung.org. Now, after tonight's lecture, around 9 o'clock, when we end, we will continue for about 15 or 20 minutes for discussion if anyone feels like they want to continue our dialogue for a little longer. Our speaker does not always join us, but is of course welcome to. So if you'd like to stay a little longer with us tonight, please feel welcome to. I'm now going to pass it over to Janine Cooper, who is going to introduce tonight's speaker.
Thank you, Ulrich. Welcome, everyone. I'm Janine Cooper. I'm very honored to introduce our speaker this evening, Marie-Antonia Wood. She is a woman with both an extensive career in the fine art field, spanning 30 years of making and showing visual art, as well as an associate professor and program chair of depth psychology and creativity at Pacifica Graduate Institute. She holds both a master's and a PhD in depth psychology and mythological studies. As a published author, her first Routledge book, The Archetypal Artist, Reimagining Creativity and the Call to Create, has led to a 6-week course via Pacifica Extension. Additionally, a new offering of a 9-week course through the Cosmos Institute will be forthcoming this winter. She has a private mentoring practice which, quoting her website, serves to bring about a reinvigorated relationship with the creative spirit, the deep mystery of imagination that can transform art making into soul making. She says, ultimately, what we're searching for is meaning. Not only is meaning essential as we face the many difficulties of the artist's life, it is also our primary conduit to the deepest sources of creativity, to soul Psyche herself. On that note, we're very excited to present to you Marie-Antonia Wood.
Thank you so much, Janine, and thank you to all the members of JAWM. I am so delighted to be here. As I was mentioning, as we were having a casual conversation before launching the Zoom, I've been living with these ideas that I'd like to present with you tonight in a very concentrated form for probably over a year when we first started talking about finding a slot for me to present to you and your community. So that has been a real gift to live with these ideas that for such a sustained amount of time. So before I launch in with, I have a PowerPoint that I'd like to share. I'd like to invite everyone to find something to write with. You may have next to you pen, pad of paper. You can open a Word document on your laptop, open something on your phone, gather something now. I want to ask, have us consider 3 questions. It won't take long, but this will, I'd like to do this at the end of the presentation before we dive into discussion. While the ideas are still fresh in our minds, our bodies, I'm hoping that these 3 questions may allow us to go a bit more to go deeper in more personal ways. I'm not going to ask anyone to share, although there may be a moment where that feels appropriate. So I'd like people to be as honest as they can in answering those three questions once we get to that point, knowing that there's no pressure to curate an answer that's going to sound good to a group. It just will be something that may spark something new for you and for your community, and possibly for our shared responsibilities to this planet. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and share. And I'll let Andrew let me know that everyone can see this. Beautiful. I'm going to adjust my view just a little bit. Okay. So tonight I'd like to demonstrate not only that the lives of artists, alchemists, and activists are archetypally patterned, but that these three life patterns share important characteristics and powers, starting with their imaginal powers, which can actually produce real world changes, real world manifestations. The work of all three of these has oftentimes been described as transformative, and at least for the artist and the alchemist, as blurring the lines between psyche and matter, between inner worlds and outer worlds. As we'll see, imagination and transformation are the two primary powers that most accurately unite all three of these figures. I'm going to focus on the alchemist, the artist, and the activist individually, and then demonstrate how they're related and what they offer to us today. Finally, I'll suggest how we might participate in their powers of imagination and transformation. To do this, I'll be calling upon some of the greats, the icons of depth psychology, including C.G. Jung, Marie-Louise von Franz, and James Hillman, along with more contemporary Jungian and Jungian adjacent voices, such as the analyst Jeffrey Raff, scholar Aaron Cheek, and then I'll be turning to contemporary thinkers, creators, and activists outside of the greater depth psychological sphere, such as Gloria Anzaldúa, Bell Hooks, Guadalupe Maravilla, Yuval Noah Harari, and Ruha Benjamin, among others. So I've just mentioned the idea of archetypal patterns, and I don't want to gloss over that. I want to spend just a couple of minutes on the notion of archetypes and their influence on our lives, including on our callings, our vocations. In Jung's conception, an archetype is a formless potential for a certain type of creative expression. I like to think of archetypes as thematic shaping powers. In the Jungian model, an actual archetype, the archetype per se, can't be known directly. Archetypes can only be experienced when they manifest as archetypal images, figures, or situations across time and across cultures. While the core thematics, the elements, the core themes associated with a particular archetype or archetypal image may be more or less universal, such as in the figures of the sage, the crone, the trickster, the tyrant, the warrior, the rebel, the healer, the magician, and so on. Their actual expression will fit the time and place in which they manifest. So with this grounding in archetypes, archetypal images, and archetypal patternings, let's consider what unites the figures of the alchemist, artist, and activist, starting with the alchemists and the art of alchemy. When we think of alchemy today, if we think of alchemy today, we generally think of it as an early and underinformed attempt at science, and as a long forgotten and somewhat embarrassing ancestor to what eventually became modern science. When we think of alchemists, we envision characters such as the one in the image here, in heavy robes and long beards, toiling away in secret laboratories deep within European estates as they tried to become rich by turning lead into gold, or immortal by creating the perfect elixir. While there's some truth in these appraisals, the history of alchemy and alchemists is much more complex and much more cross-cultural. According to contemporary scholar Aaron Cheek, alchemy has in recent years come to be described as alchemies, plural, to encompass the various streams from across cultures. Like art, many types of alchemy emerged out of ritual practice. Across many types of alchemy, two separate but complementary directions can be identified. These are material or outer alchemy and spiritual or inner alchemy. The goal of both traditions was the attainment of perfection through liberation from conditioned existence. As Aaron Cheek has written, alchemy, as the art of transmutation par excellence, seeks not only personal liberation, but the liberation or perfection of nature herself. Focusing now a little more tightly on Jungian interpretations, the analyst and author Jeffrey Raff has described alchemy as a strange mixture of visionary states and experiences and physical work with material substances. It's not incorrect to understand alchemy as a metaphor. Neither is it incorrect to approach it as a guide to actual transmutative experiences, in which the gold being created is an enlightened consciousness. So alchemical processes do offer evocative, metaphorical mirrors of inner psychic processes, such as the Jungian notion of individuation, for example. But as Raff suggests, and what I'd like to emphasize, is that the alchemists, along with the artist and activist, engage in actual transformational processes. Also, according to Raff, alchemy was a type of mystery religion based on tradition and direct revelation. Alchemists had to demonstrate that they were worthy of the knowledge that they sought. Revelation was necessary, and revelation was directly linked with imagination. Imagination is key to my talk this evening. Imagination is not only a faculty, but a place, a realm of reality, a distinct realm that we generally dismiss or take for granted in contemporary Western cultures. Yet it is the place where all transformation begins. Let's look now at a few of Jung's appraisals of alchemy and alchemists. Jung had been working steadily for over a dozen years on his Liber Novus, his Red Book, when in 1928 he was gifted a copy of The Secret of the Golden Flower, a Chinese book of life, by his friend, the sinologist, Richard Wilhelm. Upon encountering the book, which is a translation of a Chinese alchemical text, Jung felt that a vast hidden world had been opened to him. This introduction to the alchemy of the East led to his prolonged study of the alchemy of the West. He saw cross-cultural parallels and confirmation to his intimations of a hidden union, an unus mundus of inner and outer, physical and spiritual, and of the powers of imagination to transform both psyche and matter, as in this passage about imaginatio, imagination. The imaginatio, or act of imagining, was thus a physical activity that could be fitted into the cycle of material changes that brought these about and was brought about itself by them in turn. In this way, the alchemist related himself not only to the unconscious, but directly to the very substance which he hoped to transform through the power of imagination. So here we have Jung linking imagination very directly to the processes of alchemy, both inner and outer, material and spiritual. Jung's reading of this text and his personal experiences with the oracle of the I Ching, which was actually synchronistically mentioned earlier this very evening when we were prepping to open the doors, his personal experiences were key factors in the development of his theory of synchronicity, as recounted here by Jung's most prominent colleague, Marie-Louise von Franz. When he, meaning Jung, created the concept of synchronicity, Jung laid a foundation which might lead us to see the complementary realms of psyche and matter as one reality. Synchronistic events thus seem to point toward a unitary aspect of existence, which transcends our conscious grasp and which Jung has called the unus mundus. Jung's investigations into the possibility of a unitary aspect of existence were intensified when he met the young physicist Wolfgang Pauli, who had already made a name for himself by the time he met Jung. As some of you Jung aficionados certainly know, Pauli had been going through a very challenging time in his life and had sought out Jung for analysis. Jung actually assigned one of the analysts in his circle to work with Pauli first, but eventually he did take on Pauli as an analysand. And over the course of several years, the two men worked with hundreds of Pauli's dreams and exchanged numerous letters. Some of you may have already encountered the wonderful book from, maybe 20 years ago now, Beverly Zabrinsky's book, Adam and Archetype, the Jung-Pauli Letters. Jung's conversation with Pauli aided in Jung's conception of a blurring of psyche and matter, what he would go on to call in various places the psychoid or the psychoidal, meaning quasi-psyche, quasi-psychic. It's an unusual word, doesn't appear that frequently in his body of work. So the passage here from Jung's volume 9.2 on archetypes illustrates this blurring of realms that we normally think of as being totally distinct. Psyche cannot be totally different from matter, for how otherwise could it move matter? And matter cannot be alien to psyche, for how else could matter produce psyche? Psyche and matter exist in one and the same world, and each partakes of the other. So from alchemy and its impact on Jung's theories of an unseen union of worlds and unus mundus, and or mutual cooperation between psyche and matter, let's turn to art and to the figure of the artist as expressed by Jung and von Franz. Jung wrote in his collected works, Volume 15, The Spirit in Man, Art and Literature, that art is constantly at work, educating the spirit of the age, conjuring up forms in which the age is most lacking. The unsatisfied yearning of the artist reaches back to the primordial image in the unconscious, an image that is best fitted to compensate the inadequacy and one-sidedness of the present. And von Franz, from her lectures on Jung's typology, co-written with James Hillman, it is generally the creative artist who creates the future. A civilization that has no creative people is doomed. So the person who is really in touch with the future, with the germs of the future, is the creative personality. So in these two brief statements, I see assertions that the creative individual, the artist, possesses the skills necessary to bring psychic contents, or pieces of imagination, if you will, into consciousness and into the world of matter, what we call reality. The objects and experiences, whether they be a novel, a film, a painting, and so on, can then, at least potentially, alter physical reality. Let's hold those statements from Jung and von Franz in mind as we look at three statements from contemporary creators themselves, who I think make strikingly similar assertions. First, the poet and essayist Jane Hirshfield, from a book of translations of Japanese court poetry of the Heian era. Poetry is a natural upwelling of language in an awakened and interested heart, an irresistible and effortless answering within the individual to the continual calling of the other, and as possessing a virtually magical power to change and ameliorate the external order of life. Next, novelist D.H. Lawrence, from an essay that he wrote on the work of Walt Whitman. The essential function of art is moral, not aesthetic, not decorative, not pastime and recreation, but a passionate, implicit morality, not didactic, a morality which changes the blood rather than the mind. Changes the blood first, the mind follows later in the wake. And then from Lawrence Ferlinghetti, the beat poet and publisher, art is capable of the total transformation of the world, of life itself, and nothing less is really acceptable. Now, these are some powerful statements about what art can do in our world. For me, they echo and amplify those that I've just shared from Jung and von Franz about the interplay of psyche and matter and the relationship between imagination and transformation. Uniting the alchemist with the artist and the activist is the idea of the artifacts, another unusual word, but one that was proposed by James Hillman in an essay within his collected works called Jung's Daimonic Inheritance. You'll find that in the volume Philosophical Intimations. So the artifacts is a craftsperson. And here, according to Hillman, the task of working the materia prima of the actual unconscious was always that of the artist, who did not express merely his personal suffering, but reflected the torment of the anima mundi, the suffering in the roots. By artist, I mean artifacts, whether artist, alchemist, or analyst, and I know there are a number of analysts here. the one who takes in hand the driftwood, the cacophonic sounds, the scraps of bricolage, and returns this unconsciousness to the roots. There's another small section here that is not included on the slide, but I will read to you that takes this idea of the artifacts directly, focuses it on Jung's life. And Hillman continues, if Jung's vision is similar to that of the artifacts, and if his life conforms to the duty and destiny of the artist, despite Jung's protests, nonetheless, this is the legacy he leaves culture and is also his therapy. If his vision compares with the artist's, then the work of therapy is also to be conceived or imagined as an artistic endeavor. So again, the artifacts is a craftsperson, not someone who is aloof, elite, or distant from the concerns of their fellow human beings. In fact, the artifacts is just the opposite. The figure that Hillman is describing is deeply embedded into the muck of life, into the prima materia. With the idea of the artifacts now in mind, I want to now highlight a few contemporary individuals whose lives and works display the hybridity of artist, alchemist, and activist, starting with Guadalupe Maravilla. Some of you may be familiar with his work. Some of you may be hearing his name for the very first time this evening. Maravilla is a New York-based visual artist, object maker, performance artist, professor, choreographer, sound healer, and immigrant rights activist. Having come from El Salvador to the US unaccompanied as a child, much of his work weaves together themes of migration and the trauma of being undocumented. These combine with his spiritual philosophies and practices, which are inspired by the indigenous peoples of Central America. Maravilla was diagnosed with colon cancer about 15 years ago, and since that time has considered the works that he creates to be healing devices, not only for himself, but for others, especially those suffering the physical effects of psychological traumas. Like an alchemist, Maravilla fully believes that the objects, environments, sounds, and movements that he creates, in union with his spiritual practices, have the power to transform both matter and psyche. The signature elements of his work are the large gongs that you can see in the image to the right, that he incorporates into many of his installations. Either alone or in collaboration with others, Maravilla will create immersive environments where participants lie on the floor or the ground within and around the sculptural elements to not only hear the gongs, but to feel the sound vibrations. Some of these installations have been quite ambitious and have been staged in public parks and other communal spaces. They're meant to create an intersection of psyche and matter, of spirit and world, where both healing and revelation are possible. In a recent video interview, Maravilla insisted that the new artist, the artist that's needed right now, is a hybrid possessing many powers. He himself is just such a hybrid. While time doesn't permit me to linger much longer on his life and work, I'd like to invite you to discover his vast body of transformational work, including numerous recent videos and interviews that you can easily find online. The second hybrid individual that I'd like to profile is Gloria Anzaldúa, who described herself as a mestiza, Latina, queer, artist, activist, and theorist. Anzaldúa's writings, teachings, and her life itself were greatly influenced by Jungian and archetypal thought. Some of you may know of her, some of you may not know of her depth of knowledge in Jungian and archetypal thought. She is most well known in feminist and Latinx studies. But she read directly from Jung's collected works, from Hillman's writings, and from the sources that inspired them, including original works in alchemy, mysticism, philosophy, and mythology. I'd like to introduce you to two of her main theories, which are also processes or ways of doing things, ways of being in the world. The first is conocimiento, which can be translated as wisdom, awareness, gnosis, or as a deep holistic knowledge, as opposed to intellectual knowing. It implies being in relationship with ideas, things, and people, the opposite of the Cartesian paradigm of subject to object. Conocimiento, according to contemporary feminist scholar Ana Louise Keating, who is the premier Anzaldúan scholar working today, is an ambitious, overarching theory of consciousness. It's a non-hierarchical, and recursive epistemology and way of being that attempts to unite all dimensions of life, not only the inner dimensions such as intellectual, the emotional, instinctive, imaginal, spiritual, and bodily, but also the outer dimensions such as social and the political. Inspired by both alchemical processes and the creative processes that Anzaldúa observed in artists and in her own creative work, she identified 7 alchemical stages of transformation that comprise her theory of conocimiento. While numbered, these steps aren't meant to be sequential. One can start or return to any stage, and one can get stuck in a particular stage, perhaps for a very long time. Just a quick glance at these 7 stages. We can see coming together, falling apart. We can see the alchemical processes of dissolution, solutio. We can see the coagulation, coagulatio, the blow up, clash of realities. Just when you think you have it together, you don't. Shifting realities, finding a home between realities. While time limits me from going into depth into each of these stages, again, we can see some affinities here to alchemy. We can also see how Anzaldúa included some of her own cultural heritage in this theory of conocimiento, particularly her incorporation of the Aztec goddesses, Coatlicue. In this stage number 3, when we fall into desconocimiento, the times when we feel like we've fallen into ignorance. Coatlicue is a statue that can turn one to stone. And then in process number 5, Coyolxauhqui, who is the moon. We were speaking earlier about the beautiful full moon that occurred last night. And this moon goddess in Aztec mythology is torn apart. She's dismembered. And in conocimiento, she is put back together, continually put back together, but again can be taken apart. The second Anzalduan theory that I'd like to share with you this evening is also a process called spiritual activism. It can be explained in a simple formula: inner work plus public acts equals spiritual activism. In her lifetime, and by the way, Anzaldúa died at a very young age. She was only 52, died in 2004. A brilliant thinker, scholar, artist, activist who could have done so much more had she not passed at such a young age. But regarding spiritual activism, she insisted that the union of inner work and outer work makes bridges between the life of the mind, the life of the body, the life of the spirit, and the life of the collective. In moments of connection between the inner and outer worlds, the soul and physical world come together, they intersect. And spiritual activism stitches these two worlds together. Turning back again to Anna Louise Keating, who I mentioned earlier, the contemporary feminist scholar, she describes spiritual activism as involving a visionary, experientially based epistemology and ethics that advances a metaphysics of interconnectedness while requiring concrete actions in the world for healing and transformation. So the inner work, so familiar to us, those of us in Jungian, archetypal, and depth psychological work, must be combined with the outer work, with the concrete actions in the world. And as in alchemy and in Jung's theory of synchronicity, Anzaldua's theory of spiritual activism proposes that the worlds of matter and psyche are not necessarily distinct, and that they can intersect and influence each other. In addition, this Jungian focus on inner work, which is so key, so important, is intertwined with public acts. Another important artist, activist, and alchemist hybrid is the poet, essayist, art, and social critic Bell Hooks. While she and Anzaldúa are sadly no longer living, their insights continue to be influential, including this one that's always stood out to me, particularly at our moment in time here in the US. It occurred to me that if one could make a people lose touch with their capacity to create, lose sight of their will and their power to make art, then the work of subjugation, of colonization, is complete. Such work can be undone only by acts of concrete reclamation. So for me, Hooks reveals why imagination is one of the first things to be attacked by authoritarian and oppressive regimes. We can see this happening daily here in our own country with the orchestrated dismantling of education at all levels and the relentless attacks on the arts, humanities, and even upon science and medical research. Historian and social critic Yuval Noah Harari's work has been highly influential over the past decade or so for individuals and groups trying to understand human behaviors and address the collective crises that are threatening all of us. Germane to the subject of tonight's talk is his conception of imagined orders. In his book, Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind, from probably about 10, 15 years ago, Harari argues that that what humans take for granted as being the natural order of things are actually no such thing. They're orders that were first imagined and then either enforced and or absorbed. He argues that we're indoctrinated from birth with our culture's quote unquote imagined orders of hierarchy, power, and value. Yet these are not objective across time and culture. One of his examples that he uses in this book is the idea of womanhood, of what makes a woman, the value of a female in various cultures and various times. And as we know, the imagined order of many eras was that a woman was property. So he charts this out very, very in great detail of the worth and value of people themselves throughout history. He underscores the power of imagination when he states that in order to change an existing imagined order, we must first believe in an alternate imagined order. This is a powerful statement that to me parallels a key alchemical maxim: like cures like. Only imagination can counter what has emerged from imagination. The final individual that I'd like to feature is scholar, professor, author, and MacArthur Fellow, Ruha Benjamin. In her very recent book from 2024, Imagination, a Manifesto, she offers a stirring call to reimagine the structures that bind us, structures that once had to be imagined before being imposed upon humankind. The structures that are threatening our very survival. Here, her description of imagination as a sacred place is not far from what Jungians have already known, have always known about the collective unconscious, or whatever we might want to call that sacred space. What if our imagination is also a sacred space where we can connect with ourselves, our ancestors, even future generations, a place where poetic knowledge can emerge? Benjamin foregrounds the critical role that imagination has played and continues to play in creating a world order that is increasingly inequitable, hostile, and dangerous for many, many people. We're in an imagination battle, writes Benjamin. Nothing has to look or function the way it does. I've only recently discovered her work, but I see echoes of Harari's theory of imagined orders, as well as Anzaldua's spiritual activism, the union of inner work with outer acts, plus, of course, Jungian and archetypal insights into imagination. Although I haven't seen yet her credit those earlier branches of thought, those earlier thinkers. So I want to circle back to circumambulate a bit around to Gloria Anzaldúa one more time, who declared with conviction, "I change myself, I change the world." This wasn't a metaphorical statement for her, but a deeply held belief that transformations of both psyche and matter can occur in the realm of imagination where these two polarities meet. This simple affirmation is also a call to personal responsibility. If I shift now into the first person, I can assert, I am capable of and responsible for transforming myself, and I am capable of and responsible for transforming the world, even in small ways. As Ansaldua moved between worlds via her writing, teaching, public activism, and private spiritual work, she developed a relationship to a place that she called Nepantla, a place of possibility and sometimes confusion. She reminds us here that nothing is fixed, that the pulse of existence, the heart of the universe, is fluid. Identity, like a river, is always changing, always in transition, always in Nepantla. And here, as acting as a nod of gratitude to Jung for his enduring insights into imagination and transformation. Every good idea and all creative work are the offspring of the imagination. The debt we owe to the play of imagination is incalculable. It's therefore short-sighted to treat fantasy, on account of its risky or unacceptable nature, as a thing of little worth. It must not be forgotten that it is just in the imagination that a man's highest value may lie. Well, you'll see I've made a little alteration here from a man's to an individual's. And with that, I want to offer you some of the resources, the references that were used here. Of course, this talk will be recorded, so you can come back and linger on this if you'd like to go deeper. But let me stop sharing now so that we can all see each other. And if you take out your pen and paper that we talked about earlier, or open a Word document or something on your computer, on your phone, let me invite you to please consider 3 questions before we open things up for discussion. And again, there will be no expectation of sharing unless something may come up during our discussion that feels just right for the moment. But I'd like you to be as honest with yourselves and non-curated as possible. So question number 1. Have you ever encountered an artwork, a performance, or other experience that transformed your blood, that changed you before your mind could catch up? What was it?
Could you repeat that, please?
Yes, thank you. I'd be happy to. And this is inspired by the passage that I read from D.H. Lawrence about the power of art to change the blood and leave the mind following in the wake. And the question is, have you ever encountered an artwork, performance, or other experience that transformed your blood, that changed you before your mind could catch up? What was it? And of course, you can linger on these a little bit more this evening, tomorrow. It may not come to you right at this moment. So here's the second question. Have you ever considered yourself to be a hybrid person, someone with many powers, regardless of whether they've been recognized by others? And I'll repeat that one as well. Have you ever considered yourself to be a hybrid person? Someone with many powers, regardless of whether those powers have been recognized by others. And then the third question, the final question. Where do you need to be wielding your powers right now? Where do you need to be wielding your powers? And with that, I will thank you very kindly for your attention and open things up for questions, discussion. Let's chat. Speaking of chat, yeah, Andrew mentioned to use your little hand, but you can also put things in the chat. I will open that up now so I can see that. I know Andrew will help me if I. Oh, thank you so much, Janine. I see now that you put the questions in the chat. How beautiful. Penelope.
Yeah, I mean, it was wonderful to be introduced to all those wonderful new names and people, many who I didn't know. But when you asked the first question, what came to mind was Laurie Anderson's piece of, I think it's called For the Love of a Dog or For the Love of a Dog. Do you know that piece?
I don't. I know her, but the piece is not.
Oh, you have a treat.
Okay. I'm going to make notes too.
I think that's what it's called, The Love of a Dog. It's a film, and it's a combination of dream and hypnagogic state and memory and photography and Buddhist meditation. It's just exquisite. It's so integrative. And it has haunted me in a good way for a long time. Her art, some of it is her drawing, some of it's photography, some of it's memory. It's, and it's about trauma resolution. It's just astonishingly rich. So please enjoy.
I will. I made a note of it. Maravilla works in much that same way, in many different modes. Um, if his health holds out, I can see him certainly moving into film and other types of arenas that he's not worked in yet.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. Thank you. Wonderful, wonderful.
Thanks, Penelope. Elliot, I see your hand up.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
I can.
Hi, thank you so much for your presentation. I felt like I had to, when you started your presentation with the first photo, you had three tarot cards. And yesterday, for the full moon, for the first time in over decades, maybe more, I pulled out my tarot deck and just flipped through it and decided I would reacquaint myself, basically. I used to read tarot way back in the 60s, 70s, 80s. And I chose three cards to focus on, which I've always been I've always loved, and they were the three cards that you had. So that struck me immediately. It was the Magician and the Empress and the High Priestess. So anyway, so that pulled me in directly.
Oh, yeah.
But then I have never been an artist, although I believe I have been an activist, and I have been an activist and a ceremonialist, which is kind of akin to magician
Yeah,
or alchemist.
absolutely.
I combined the two for a good number of years. Back in the 60s, everybody was a witch. Everybody was an alchemist. We were all movement witches. We were activists. We were anti-war activists, and we were doing magic, big magic. And that was the era. It was the era, and the art at the time. Art was exploding. Consciousness, the psyche. So everything you're saying about the connection between the material and art creating the future and the imagination. It was all active and alive then. I went in to that late 60s a incredibly neurotic, middle class teenager, from the suburbs, and I came out a freak. So the combination of all of the art, Allen Ginsberg and the rock and roll artists and the abstract artists and all of it just hitting you constantly. I mean, it had to change your blood. It just had to. You couldn't avoid it. So I understand and I relate to all of what you were saying there.
Yeah, as you're saying that, I'm wondering, and I was thinking of this earlier today, um, other than Maravilla, who's this true hybrid, the quintessential hybrid who is living and working today, Anzaldúa is gone, Bell Hooks is gone. Harari is not an activist, not an alchemist, not an artist, influential with his thinking. Ruha Benjamin, I've just discovered, as far as I know, not an artist, certainly an activist. So maybe I could toss this to you, Elliot, or to the whole group. The kind of energy that you're talking about from the 60s, where is that now? Who are the artists that we can look at now who are changing the blood, who are daring, who are uniting together, who are forming a movement that can impact?
There's a group in New York. They've been around for a couple of decades. They're totally dedicated activists. They're called the Reverend Billy and the Stop Shopping Choir. And Reverend Billy patterned himself after the Southern preacher, that evangelical preacher. And stop shopping. His message was to stop shopping for years. He's changed that and with a full choir, like a religious ceremony. And he's changed that message to, and he just made a tour. They're based in New York, but they made a tour. They're totally focused on saving the earth, and they created the phrase "Earth-Alleluia." And they just did a tour with Neil Young. They opened his show all around the country, and I posted a video that they made, a 30-minute video. So powerful, so transformative in their energy and it is alchemy. You're watching alchemy and you're feeling it. and it's for a cause that is, desperate, in the now. It's the earth and the calling of the earth.
Yeah, I've noted that. I can't wait to learn more about them. Deborah, you have your hand up.
Hello. I just have to stop the microwave. Hold on a second.
Oh,
I forgot to eat. First, I want to just speak my celebration or sense of meeting the validation of hybridism and not belonging. I so want to learn more about this El Salvadorian man. I'm also dealing with colon cancer, and I'm so convinced that it has to do with not finding a home in the world for your hybrid nature, and how to heal that first chakra upward. And he's using it all. I just came from Kundalini yoga class, and there I am looking at this image of this man wearing all his colors among all these gongs, having just been through this thing that is so sensitive, so sensitizes your appreciation for sound and vibration. And then at the same time, to have the grounding of your scholarliness and all these quotes, but to looking at these people I love, and several of them being gone. Like I followed Hillman around, any place within 700 miles that I could see him, I would. And I didn't, and I was around Jungians who eschewed him because of never mind, I don't even need to say why, but because I loved him, that was another reason to be outcast. But what I so appreciated about what you were doing, as I'm sure you well know, in his final years, he was married to an artist, and his love of the people who actually made things and did things. Yes. And you would go to the Great Mother Conference when he was there or something like that in the woods. You're seeing a different man than the man who spoke 8 languages and showed up in a suit and tie to deliver a paper. You saw the tap dancing, joyous, father of an astrologer and 2 girls in a rock band. And then Bill Hooks. Anyway, and so I really trust you on all these other people you're bringing to me, and I'm excited about that. But in your last question, I couldn't help but think of Mandani, this young man who is the child of artists, the child of a scholar, politically astute, spiritually awake, savvy as all hell. I mean, he's out there. The New York Times article today about fundraising. The man is looking out for himself. He's not just saying, let's give free childcare and free bus rides. Let's figure out how to get money behind us. It's so exciting to still be alive and to see that, and to think you might be able to make a home in the world. So thank you. Just really, thank you.
well, thank you, Deborah.
Mm-hmm. There was more, but I can't just bring it all up fast enough,
Well, I'll comment on a few things that will amplify, use that Jung term, what you've mentioned, is that for Maravilla, he absolutely believes that his colon cancer was a result of the trauma of having to cross several countries with the guide, the coyote, brought him as a child to, across Central America, across the full length of Mexico to Tijuana, where he had family members meet him and then take him to New York.
And I'm sure you know the work of Ruth Lanius. She's a protege of Bessel van der Kolk, but even deeper and broader than he admires her and goes to see her speak. But she's done all the work on how early childhood trauma informs cardiac disease, cancer, and diabetes in particular. Yeah.
And Gabor Mate is coming to Montreal too.
Yeah. Well, yes.
But I think if you, and I'm sure you will, look up Guadalupe Maravilla.
I want to just go be at his feet.
There's amazing interviews with him online. He just speaks like this incredible sage, so gentle, so wise. And the one I watched this morning for his new work, sponsored by one of the museums in Boston. It's traveled to several places. It's called Mariposa Relámpago.
Mariposa?
Mariposa, yeah, butterfly. Butterfly lightning is the translation. Mariposa Relámpago. It's and there was an image I showed on the left. You couldn't see a whole lot of it. It was him standing inside what looked like a bus, and that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
An old school bus that the US sends their old school buses down to Central America, and those are repurposed into transport for communities, and they're decorated beautifully.
With soul, yeah.
With soul. So he bought one and brought it to Mexico City, worked on it, welded it, and every single item that he put on it has something to say about spirit, matter, healing, trauma, migration. And the gongs are inside it. And it's moved into several. It was in Austin. It was in Boston. It's been in a couple of other locations. So people can come in. They lie on the floor. He plays, he or one of his other healing,
Right.
sound healing practitioners will come in and create a soundscape for healing. And this video I watched this morning, I think it's the Art 21 link that's on the reference slide, is shows some of his paintings in a gallery setting with this repurposed bus. And I think you'll find them very moving because they show him like a cross section of a young boy as he's painted the inside of his body, showing his intestines. And how that part of his body was impacted by the extreme trauma of being undocumented, traveling across so many countries all alone, and then trying to find home. That was actually a theme that, again, one of these themes that started before we even opened the Zoom session. Some of the board members that were here were chatting about home. What is home to you? And that's another key part of his work about not really belonging here or there. It's the Nepantla, one of the last slides that I showed.
What is that word?
Nepantla.
Nepantla.
Nepantla and I'll put it in the chat.
Because I think one of the challenges is if you find a community, like for instance, maybe Jungian psychology, but in your early exposure, you may find a community like I did that's a lot of intellectual talking heads. They're brilliant. They're geniuses. I was raised in a blue-collar family. It was incredible privilege. But the whole rest of like 70% of me was like, well, wait a minute. What are we going to do with this? What are we going to do? What do we do? And then until you meet Hillman or Marion Woodman or somebody who understood that movement, you feel, you do get exiled. You're not you are a swan in a duck pond or a duck in a swan pond. I don't care how you say it. But when you make a circle of all the hybrid people, then suddenly I think, oh, I could be at home in this world. Yeah.
I think you're going to love looking into Anzaldua's idea of Nepantla. I put that word in the chat. That's inspired by a Nahuatl word. Nahuatl language is still spoken in Mexico. It was the language of the Mixtec people, some of the original peoples. Oh, thank you, Andrew, for adding that. And it means a place in between. It has a very Jungian feeling to it. When one is not necessarily at home in one place, you don't belong here, but you don't exactly belong there.
You live in the psychoid.
You live in the psychoid, in the in-between, that place of possibility. It's a place of confusion, but also a possibility of creativity. Anzaldúa, when she talks about Jung's transcendent function, which is a term that most of us here are probably somewhat familiar with, where you hold a tension of polarities or opposites long enough that something new can be created in that space in between. So her articulation is don't pick sides, don't pick a side. Stay in that ungrounded middle space where you can partake. You can be a vessel, the medium, the translator, but you're not necessarily going to be real comfortable there.
But you get to meet the other uncomfortable people.
You do, yes. The hybrid folks are in there. The Renaissance people who don't really know where to fit in a culture that valorizes specialists. Yeah, so yeah, thank you, Deborah. Janine, you've had your hand up for a bit.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm feeling so nourished by this conversation. My heart just feels like there's some heat emanating from my heart center, just like, oh, so many things that are so central to my being, my existence, because I'm a healer, an activist, and an artist. And to even be presented with the idea that I'm a hybrid person with many powers, and to consider that when I've had to compartmentalize myself so often in my life to be in an activist space or be in the fine art world in an artist space or to be in a healer space. You don't bring your creativity necessarily, not in the Jung realm. It is why I love this community and this practice and this way of thinking so much, because for me it's the only modality of healing that I don't know if exalts is the right word, but acknowledges the central importance of creativity or what creativity truly is, to me anyway, in my understanding. What I wanted to offer from your wonderful questions is, because I felt so much excitement at being asked these questions, is even though I'm a visual artist and so much art has informed my entire life and way of thinking and seeing the world, it's actually music that has gotten me. The first time I ever witnessed in person and physically full body felt a flamenco performance that utterly changed me. I felt parts of myself like awaken or come alive or emerge. It's just utterly transformative. And the same thing with the first time I ever experienced a full ensemble Balkan brass band with an entire room like dancing so much you think the floor is going to cave in and the roof is going to
Yeah.
fall off. Those were, utterly transformative. And the last thing I just want to share is I'm preaching to the choir for so many local people here, but for anybody who's not around here and who doesn't know of the most wondrous Bread and Puppet. Bread and Puppet is a local institution, and they do tour. They have toured, they just recently toured all along the East Coast, but they are a my gosh, how to describe them? If you're not familiar with their work, they're extraordinary. And to experience them in person, they create larger than life puppets from any scale, from, 2 stories tall, like enormous puppets that wouldn't fit in any structure, have to only be performed outdoors, to smaller scale full production, but in a way that's very satirical, playful, cynical, extremely political, and very musical and radicalized and asking for audience participation and really combining all the best of those things, artistry and alchemy and activism, because they are demanding. You cannot be at a bread and circus performance without waking up. Like it's literally impossible. So anyway, I just wanted to toot their horn because they're such a fabulous and most beloved. Like they make the planet better. And also, I noticed in the chat someone mentioned Extinction Rebellion, which I feel similarly about. They're extraordinary as well. Thank you so much. Appreciate you.
You, Janine. Yeah, I'm making notes. I've made notes of put in the chat for me to discover. Penelope, you had your hand up next.
Yes. I would like to say I was in Santa Fe for the No Kings Day recently, and it was what we're talking about. There were costumes and puppets and performances and chanting, multiracial. thousands and thousands of people. It was all happening and it was elevating. It was wonderful. So forgot about that, but that was really spectacular.
Yes, from all the accounts I've seen and for what we had here in Santa Barbara, which was very similar
Mhm.
for such a small town, it was incredible, really incredible.
Yeah.
Andrew,
A little awkward to put myself in the queue, but here I am. Uh, in response to your first question, I had something pop up that's from the recesses of my memory, but it was interesting. It came up. Um, I must have been in my 20s, and I think it was at the MoMA, the Museum of Modern Art in New York, a colossal sculpture that occupied a great gallery space. It was a black ovoid metal shape, like a giant egg. And I walked up to it and didn't know what I was looking at. And then I realized it was painted black, and I was standing in front of an opening to the interior.
mm,
And I had the sense of immensity, the void. And it wasn't frightening. It was compelling. It was stirring. And that is a reference point for me. I'm a practicing Quaker, and I sit in waiting silence, and that settling in is like going into that void space where darkness is not frightening, it's actually rich. It's a fulminant, a full, vibrant, open space of unknowing, but being deeply known, something like that.
oh, so
Um,
expressed.
thank you. Um, the hybrid, I just want to say out loud that these things that we're talking about are pathologized in the wider society.
Mhm.
And I've had to, for myself, learn to quiet those judgments and those frames of reference and allow myself to be more in my imagination, and in my work, I'm an archival researcher. I practice moral imagination quite
Mhm.
extensively as a way of doing my profession, seeking after greater truth that can be known in the historical record in the archives. And I think of that as a kind of continually testing, almost like a piano tuner, like note, is it on pitch? And then are these, and how do these all relate? But continually testing after truth.
Mhm.
Um, and that is part of my hybrid life. It applies in many spaces. And it's a commitment to basic integrity.
Yeah, integrity is a key word. Um, One place that's taking me is to there's a wonderful audio. I think it's probably a bootleg audio. It's not very professionally done from one of James Baldwin's talks called The Artist's Search for Integrity. That
Uh,
is that is a thing that to me changed my blood. Not an
mm,
artwork per se, but this towering artist, this figure of
mhm,
moral integrity,
yeah,
speaking as he did, pretty much off the cuff, with passion, with conviction about how can we survive in a world that doesn't value us, that actually fears the creative person, that wants
yes.
to control, diminish, put to sleep
Yeah.
creative powers. Just like the bell hook's very short passage, the work of subjugation is complete when we lose our powers individually or as a culture, as a collective, to imagine, to create. So I will put that in the chat, but it's a about 25-minute audio. You can find it easily on YouTube. It is stunning. I'm not going so far as to say it's life-changing.
Thank you. I'll look for that.
Yeah, I'll put it in there now. There it is. So, along with this idea of the hybrid, one thing that emerged for me as I was building the presentation that just kept coming to the fore, maybe even more than this concept of hybridity, those archetypally patterned life ways, is that there is a real, there's a kind of reality that encompasses both psyche and matter, where things blur, a reality that we don't understand, that we're not really, we are not conscious of, whether we use Jung's strange word, the psychoid, whether we say imagination, mundus imaginalis, for some of you with interest and background in Henri Corbin's work, so influential to Hillman. The mundus imaginalis was that place in between, where psyche and matter can communicate, can collaborate, and can influence each other. So what I keep wondering, even for myself in particular, is how to get in there and actually be the alchemist. Not to direct, not to use willpower, but to come into relationship with, collaborate with, in that place of blurring. And I think a lot of that goes to what you just mentioned now, Andrew, with the waiting. I think you used maybe watchful waiting, or I'm not sure the exact term you used, but it's a lot of settling in. And then, of course, the amazing Jungian technique of active imagination. Some of you who are analysts are probably using that with your analyses. Many of you may be familiar or turn to that technique on your own. That's a real gift for dropping into that space and communicating with the figures, the forces, the powers that Jung insisted he didn't make up. They were real. And I'm curious if anyone has would like to share some of your own techniques for finding that place, whether it's active imagination, meditation, art making, singing, dancing, drumming. Penelope's put in the chat the holotropic breath work.
This might sound trite to some people. Sorry, I didn't raise my hand. But actually, walking has been a tremendous tool for me to write poetry. Yeah, if that makes sense to people. I see you nodding. Yeah.
Yeah, well, as you're saying that, I'm thinking instantly of the Vietnamese Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh, who wrote so eloquently about walking meditation, about the powers of simply walking in reverent silence. And Andrew says, greeting the day, walking by living water. Yeah, I think that we can probably agree that there are many, many things conspiring to keep us passive, to keep us semi-asleep as citizens, as humans. So the work of the alchemist, artist, activist is like the root word of activist, activating. It activates us. It wakes us up. It moves us. And Christine added in the chat some of her techniques, body awareness, movement practices like authentic movement. I'm wondering, there were introductions at the beginning, which were very interesting for me, for folks who are on the board here, folks who are writing books, who have different projects that are coming to fruition. If any of those individuals are here, I would love to know if working on those sort of projects feels like activist work to you. Does it feel like alchemy? Depending on the writing or the project you're doing, does it feel like art? Penelope. Oh, you're muted. The infamous.
I said yes.
Oh, you said yes. Okay.
I started writing a book about working with a patient for many years, and I was invited to come and live with the family while she was dying. And I did that on and off for 3 months, and it took me 10 years. But it took me 10 years because I had to bring the water of life into the story. And it became really, it's like a very poetic piece. I did not want to write to the choir. I did not want to do an academic piece. I wanted to write a story from the heart. And it was such a creative process, the way this particular person entered into dying, and her dreams showed her the way, and a small group surrounded the process. All kinds of spontaneous things happened. And everything about it was creative. And it changed all of us who were part of that. So, and the book was both a form of grieving of the most creative form. And, I've been more of a visual artist, etc., but I learned to write from the heart. So yes, my answer is yes.
Thank you, and thank you for telling us about that project.
Mm-hmm. I'm actually in the process of it went out of print, and so I'm working on it to bring it back. So yeah. My friend.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, one of the things that I touched upon was Jung's idea of synchronicity as something that moves the blood. It stops us in our tracks when we have those uncanny moments of something that's going on psychically for us, showing up right there in matter. So I'm wondering when people have had, well, just like the tarot cards, that's uncanny to use that Jungian phrase. It's just remarkable that those were the three that I chose, and that Eliot remarked on. When you've had instances of synchronicity, are you convinced of this unus mundus, of a true union, a true collaboration of psyche and matter? Or does it seem like a something that's very curious and interesting, but then you move on? So one of the things I've been pondering is, why don't we, when we notice those, make more from them? Why isn't it something that is that isn't more a part of our conversations with each other? Is there a way that we can welcome more synchronicities and stay in them a little longer? Don't know if anyone has anything to add to that, or just something to ponder. But they seem to me to be key to this idea that inner work can actually truly move matter in reality. Whether that's healing the physical body, whether that's moving enough people or the right people to act, to, as Jung said, educate the age and rebalance, unbalance eras that are unbalanced. And we're certainly in one now.
I remember when I read just recently, again, read Jung's Dreams and Reflections, and where he talks about the synchronicity and his dreams and his imagination. And what struck me was that he was, how unusual an individual he was. I thought that he would take that, I guess being an American or a Western, that he would take the synchronicity so seriously that he would change his entire life, the entire direction of his life. Whereas most people, myself included, just see it as an indication that they're where they should be, that they're in their higher self, they're in touch with their higher self, which is guiding them. But there's no way of knowing what it means necessarily right in the moment, or where it's going to lead you, except that you're balanced. You're in that individuated space where you have to, then you just trust and you just give yourself over to whatever is happening. And I just recently, I live in Florida now. I've been here for years. It's a very mundane existence in a condo. I'm the president of my condo association, and the vice president of the HOA, and it's just like 24/7 is all I'm doing, and or sleeping, and it's not. Whereas before I came down here, when I was an activist, and I was anti-war, and I was I was living in Montague on a waterfall in a cabin with no running water and no electricity, and I had a medicine wheel, and I was doing ceremony and all that. So when in the summer and fall, I get a chance to go back up to my life, the life up in Northampton or the life in the valley that is real. This year, it came together. Strangely enough, I was able to get the money, was able to rent my place, get the money, and I went up and friends put me in touch, and I was able to get a place to stay. And there was one synchronicity after the other for 3 months that just amazed me. Like things like the fellow that named Gary that used to come to my ceremonies, a young guy, and he used to come to my ceremonies at the medicine wheel, and he lived in Granby, and he had a long ponytail. And I met him at way back in the 2010s, I guess, or 2000s. I met him in Whole Foods. He was working at Whole Foods, and we struck up a conversation. I told him about the ceremonies. He would come on the equinoxes and solstices, and he, and my image of him was completely different from what he changed. He turned out to be a heavy metal guitarist, which was like, what are you doing here? What are you doing here? But then at some point in the 2010s, he stopped coming, and I lost touch with him, but I still had his number. I don't know what happened. And then 2015, I had to go to Florida and take care of my mom, which I did for 5 years, and until she passed. And this summer, one of the first things I did was I went to Whole Foods to get some food, and I was staying up I was staying in Northampton, and I went over to get some yogurt at the yogurt counter, and this guy kneeling down, he's fixing all the little yogurt containers, in a row, and he has this young guy with a long ponytail. And I went up to him behind him, and I said, "Oh, I'm going to mess up your entire thing." And it turns around, and it's Gary. It's this guy, this kid, and he'd been in California, and his band was rocking, and again, it was making records and doing all this stuff. And he's back, and he just turned away from all of that. His band wanted stardom. He didn't want that. He came back to work on an organic farm in Granby, and come back to the valley. And it was just the last person I saw before I got on the road. Again, I walk into Whole Foods, and he's standing at the entrance. That kind of synchronicity was represented my entire trip. I came down to Florida just totally elevated. I was just in a transcendent place. And then I crash landed into the condo association. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure you're dealing with lots of emails about.
But it encompassed the entire summer, encompassed so much meaning. And that's all I can gain from synchronicity is a chance that it's leading me towards some meaning in my life, and it's where I should be.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the way Jung described it, as an acausal connecting principle, and that principle is meaning. That is the deepest or the most, the clearest conception of synchronicity that I recall from Jung.
Would it be all right to ask you, Mary, what, if you could think of some moments for you?
Yes, I'm thinking about that, actually, that first question of something that changed the blood, an artwork, performance, experience. And I walked into an exhibition. I wonder if it might have been the same sort of experience that Andrew was, maybe the same artist was describing. James Turrell, who does earthworks, who works with light, with space, walked in not really knowing much about his work in, I think in Arizona, maybe in a small museum somewhere there. I know he's working on a very large environmental piece in a crater in northern Arizona above Flagstaff, but this was somewhere else. I think it was in Phoenix or Scottsdale, maybe the Phoenix Museum of Art. And I walked into a space. I was one person at a time allowed into the space. looked quite ordinary. It was round, but you really couldn't tell the contours, the way it was painted. There was something like a bench or banco around, also in maybe a plaster material. So I sat, but then looked up, and there was this opening to the sky that seemed like an opening to another realm or an opening deep inside myself. It was disorienting. It was so impactful that out of matter, out of plaster, sheetrock, out of just the placement of this opening, that it could bring such a feeling over me, deeply, deeply moving. So that's what I always think of, and I see Janine knows Terrell's work well from from the chat. Andrew.
Yeah, I'm scanning the images. I think it might have been Terrell, possibly. Same
Like the Oculus.
creation of space. Oculus, yeah. I do want to reference back to bell hooks. There was a word there, colonization, and I do understand this as decolonizing work. And what you were mentioning, waking up from sleep, or refusing to sleepwalk or to be lulled into complicity with the structures of violence. It's a very important exercise. I have the good fortune of having Dr. Ed Tick as a therapeutic mentor and friend. And I put in the chat his most recent book, Passage to Poros. Poros is an island, a Greek island, and it's essentially a love letter to an island, relating 40 years of experience traveling to that place, which includes a major temple to Poseidon. And Ed in the book relates his experience early on of climbing 3 hours to the top of the mountain to the temple. And as he comes to the temple, a sea turtle, a massive sea turtle, is walking out of the temple. And they sit and encounter each other for a very long time. And that was transformative for him. Part of what happened next was he returned to Turtle Island, as he understood it, and did some very important work. I think these synchronicities are all around us, and one of the delights of being in the Jung Association is that we notice them and celebrate them, reference them, talk about them, like we did in the green room tonight before the opening. I think it's countercultural to notice these things as they occur and mark them and find meaning in them.
But that it's the place that could provide the one, like the missing link, the one thing we haven't tried beyond rational arguments, beyond more mainstream activism, is this sort of deeper work, the sacred work.
I also want to shout out to Elliot. You are a legend, man. I know of your medicine wheel next to the river, and I'm just so glad to be in the same space with you.
Well, Sue, I see your hand up.
Thank you. Greetings. I might take it to another plane, maybe. I don't know. But Elliot gave me courage to speak. So the what spoke to my blood and opened my blood was the very first time I ever sat in a sweat lodge. It was, I think that's alchemy. You know, you got all the elements. And I felt home for the first time, really, ever, I think. And also, it was my first time ever hearing the term mitakoyasi, which is a Lakota term that means all my relations. Mm-hmm. Everything's related. And I remember coming out of the lodge and just in a whole other space and I was sitting next to the elder that poured the lodge. And he said something, and honestly, I can't recall now, but all of a sudden the wind came up. And I watched it blow the leaves, and it blew my hair, and I watched it go down and blow some of the blankets on the lodge, and it was like, I got it. That's mitakoyasi. And I think that was a synchronistic moment, and I think that synchronicity is spirit telling you you're at the right place. Keep going. You've got it. So, thank you.
Thank you.
You, Elliot. I'd love to come to your medicine wheel.
What an incredible...
When I'm back up there. Anytime. Actually, it's open anytime. Now it's covered with snow, probably, which means it's sleeping for the winter. But it's in Montague, right on the waterfall below the book mill. Everyone is welcome to go and visit. It's sacred space.
Well, Andrew and Janine, Penelope, I'm looking at our timing. I'm wondering if anyone has any last comments, anything that you'd like to share in this space.
Did have a lot of thoughts, more generally, when your first question and the question about, do you know of artists today? And there were those different artists that were mentioned. And the term that you focused on, which was hybrid. But when you first started talking, I was thinking Jung existed or lived from a time where the art movement of his youth was in Europe and elsewhere. It was Romanticism and beauty and the connection with the earth. And that was replaced by Art Nouveau and then Art Deco in Europe and then later in the United States. But at the same time, in the 20s and 30s, there erupted in Europe this Cubism and Futurism. And that was closely associated with the politics of the time, which was fascism and war, particularly in the Italian fascists who wanted war. And they manifested the war. They manifested the Second World War through the power, there were other art forms, of course. Then there were those that imagined after the war, they understood the power of art. The CIA began to fund artists like Jackson Pollock to counteract the Russian artists that were producing for the Soviets. And you had this abstract art, which they felt, the CIA felt that was the Russians wouldn't do that. They couldn't compete with that, or something like that. So you had minds and people that were programming culture. And when I look at today, where are the movements of today? In the 60s, there was the abstract, but there was, the Ferlinghetti and Ginsberg and poetry, and there was the film and so many of the arts that dealt with the conscious and unconscious and the expansion of consciousness. But when I look at today, I don't know. We're dumbed down. We're sort of numbed by the digital and the digital world. And so I don't know if I've been trying this whole time to think of, is there a movement today? is the term you used of hybrid. Is there any movement there? And if there's no movement, how can you change or direct um, culture, civilization? And the other thought I had, everybody up there in Northampton. Northampton was a prime example of that connection between the material and the spiritual and art, because there was a movie made about it, The Greening of Northampton. It started with bringing in the artists into a dead town, a dead ex-industrial town, and they build all the lofts with art. And there was a vision by the 60s ex-hippies that came up, and they started small businesses, and it transformed Northampton to one, like, a huge success story, art. And then they moved it over to East Hampton, and they moved it up to Turner's Falls, and it's the formula that art has that power.
Mhm.
Anyway, those were my thoughts that were
Well,
going
as
on.
you're saying that, one sort of tension is coming to my mind as I was reviewing the presentation and even sharing it with you all this evening. Harari states that only a reimagined order, a new imagined order, can counter one that we're living in, that we're forced to live in, or that we don't even realize we're living in. But his emphasis is on mass groups of people, like millions of people need to, I'm going to say awaken, for lack of a better term, need to reimagine, to be in the same imaginal space, to shift things. And that seems really difficult right now. We're talking about movements, anything that would shift millions of people. But then Anzaldúa felt that if she could change herself, those changes could radiate out, and in her words, change the world. And that may mean changing the world that she had influence in, the world around her, not necessarily the world. But I think it's somewhere in between those two, that there's a critical mass that we need to achieve, a movement of people who imagine, who can reimagine. And of course, have always been artists, alchemists, activists. And whether we here tonight call ourselves any of those things or not, I feel a sense of responsibility toward that, toward finding others and building that momentum, that critical mass that may be necessary for the next shift, the next rebalancing.
I want to thank you, Mary, for this presentation. It was wonderful. And I want to thank all of our participants who spoke today, because we had a wonderful conversation.